Hello everyone. In this session, we will understand properties in C Sharp. So what is properties? Properties, it is a flexible, it's a flexible mechanism to read and write the members or values of a private field. Okay, so what does it mean is, let's say I have a class sample. And inside that class I have one member, that is integer id. Now the access modifier I use is, let's say I use public. So I can use this access modifier to access this member anywhere, right? Anywhere in the project or anywhere in the other project which is linked with this project. I can access this, right? But when I deal with other access modifiers such as private, if I want to access now this ID to some other class, I cannot access. As you know, the scope of private is in the same class. When you go out of that scope, it means when you go out to other class, that is class sample1, let's say, and now if you want to access this ID over here, you cannot actually access this. This is not possible, right? So to access this ID in another class, here we use properties. So it is a flexible mechanism to read. Okay, this is returning. That means if it is returning, see, if it is return ID, that means we are reading. Okay, we are just reading here. So this is read only. But when I access, when I assigning something to this ID, that means id equals to, let's say, 101, that means we are using something called as write. Okay, write only. But when we use both this thing at the exact same time in the class, then it is nothing but a read only as well as write only. Sorry, read and write only. Read, write. I hope you understand this. Okay, so if it is only read id and not the id equals to 1, if it is not there, then it is read only. Okay, then it is only read only. But when you have both thing, when you have both thing, that means int id equals to 101, then it is read write both properties. Okay, so this is a flexible mechanism to read write the property, the members or the values of a private field. I hope you understand. Now let's get to the Visual Studio and understand it. Okay, so I have a class program here. By default, this is a project class program, and let's create one more class sample. I have a class sample over here, and class sample, and inside that class sample I'm using 3 members. Let me take private int id, private string name, private let me take float, and salary, or let me take pay. Okay, now all these are private members. I cannot access in the main method. You can see I cannot access sample. Let me create the instance of the class sample s equals to new sample. And now if you want to try this s dot, there is no chance you can access id, name, and pay. You can see there's no way you can deal with it. So if I use public, there is a possibility you can access this. 100% possibility. You see s dot id, you can access this, no problem. But instead of public, I can use, if I use private, there is no chance. You see there is an error. Okay, so how to access this private? One possible way is to use different modifier, that is public. You can use that, right, to access this id. Another thing is you can use something called as method to read this id, method to write this id. There is that another chance. Okay, this is the second approach. So let's create that second approach. So if I have the get id and set id to returning that member and assigning the values to that members, I need two methods for that. So let's create that method. Public, let me take int get id, and inside that I can return id. Okay, in a very similar way I need public void, and then I need set id, and I need to pass the arguments integer id, right? Sorry, int id, and then I can assign something here. id equals to my this value. Okay, id equals to id. In a very similar way I need to create the name and the pay. Okay, so let's create that. Okay, so public int get name, and then return this is name. Okay, then public void set name string name, and then here name equals to name. In a very similar way I need to copy paste this. So let me just copy paste this for name, and now I need to create this for pay. So get name, instead of get name I will write get pay and return the pay. And now so instead of it's for int I need to take string, and for here also there is so this get pay, so I need to take float. Then I go back to this set name, I will write set pay. Instead of string I'll write float, and name, instead of name I'll write pay. Okay, instead of this name equals to name I'll write pay equals to pay. Okay, so this is this is for get id set id, and then get name set name, and then get pay and set pay. We are doing nothing, but we are just returning everything. Return id and then assigning the id, new id, returning name and assigning the name, returning the pay or the salary and assigning some salary. Now if we try to access this thing in our main method, I can basically access this, right? With the help of this method I can access, there's no problem at all. So this is the instance of our class sample s equals to new sample. Now create this s dot, you see, get id, you can access this, no problem. I can actually print this console dot write line, and I can print this is my employee id, and I can print this. Okay, so if I print now it will show me 0 definitely. Okay, we didn't assign anything to employee id, so this is my employee id 0. But now if I try to assign some id here, you can see I can easily assign it, right? So I go to the what is the property name what is the method name, s dot set id, because we are setting some id, set id. And now if I do here, see, is asking int id, give me some id, so I'm giving 101, or let's say it's 10, let's say 10. And now if I want to print this, I can actually print console dot write line. And now I can actually take this, and instead of get id I can write set id. Actually I can print it over here, but this is s dot set id, and I can actually print this here. Instead of doing here I can do this. What is the error? Okay, so instead of writing here, let me just delete this and write here, so that s dot. Okay, so now if I try to sorry, this is not, we set it, we need to get id, sorry. So now if I run this, it'll give me the this is my employee id 0 and this is my employee id 10. We assigned something here, see, 10, and now we are getting that id here. So this is how you can access your private members of the fields in your with the help of method you can access them, get id and set id. If you want to assign something, then set id. If you are returning something, then there is a get id. But you see, for just one member you are creating two methods, get id and set id. This is a lengthy code. You see how many line of code you have to write. 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like around 10 lines of code for just 3 private members. It's big task, right? So this is not good. Another thing is, if you see this get id, it is a method, and method is somehow, there is a 100% chance, or not 100, but there is a chance that it has been accessed by malicious people, because in reverse engineering it can be easily seen, right? They can easily see that this is a method, and they can guess, or they can find it out that what is there inside the method. Okay, this is possible that hackers or malicious people can get into your method. This is possible. And because of this reason, we are using something called as property. So property is a flexible mechanism to read write the private member field. Okay, let's do the property now. We had seen the first approach to access this private field with the help of changing the access modifier from private to public. I can access this. Second is you can use methods. So we use get id and set id. Now we are going for the third approach, and third approach is our solution. That is known as properties in C#. So let's delete this get id and set id. Let's delete this, and just delete this thing too. This is not necessary. Okay, now we create some properties. So property, it can be there is the syntax is like public, the access modifier, public, and then you provide the data type. So we are accessing id, so that's why we are providing the int, and then the property name. Choose a very specific property name. It should not be like id, or it should not be like which is easily guessed by anyone. Choose something better. Right now I'm just taking just a name so that you can understand it. So I'm taking id property because we are accessing the id, and that's why I had taken id property. And inside that I can use get operation and return the id. Here, only here it is done. No need to write the get id method. Okay, in a very similar way I can assign my value to the id. So you don't have to write another method for the set id. You can directly put everything, getting and setting, here in this specific property here only. So I'm assigning now id equals to value. Okay, just like that I can write for the property for the name and the pay. So let's create that. So instead of public int, I can write public string, and then this is going to be string property. Instead of id is going to be name. Instead of id it is going to be name. Okay, now this is my string property. I can again use this for our pay. So this is public float, and this is going to be pay, return pay, and then id it's going to be pay. Okay. Okay, so we have created our properties. Okay, so this property is specifically for one id, this property is for name, and this property is for pay. Now you see, instead of writing 10 line of code, this is only 3 or 4 line of code. This is instead of writing get and set both methods, you can easily write inside one property, only one property you can write everything, get and set. You can also actually use some condition over here if you want to make just like that. If anyone using negative id, you can use some condition over here so that the user cannot provide the negative id. You can provide the the conditions over in the set operations. So this is also possible. Okay, now in the main method, how to access this? It's easy, it's pretty easy. See, s dot id property, and this specific only is used for for getting operations and for the setting operation. You don't need to write get id dot s dot get id s dot set id. Just for this, by using this one, you can getting and setting both operation can be done with the help of this. So s dot id property. Now I can basically I can print this actually. So let's print this in a very similar that we had did in our method approach. So let's do that. So let's access this. I'll write console dot writeLine, and in a very similar way, this is my employee ID, and I will access with the help of plus operation and then directly. Okay, if I run this, it will give me 0. This is my employee ID and it is 0 actually. So now I will assign something. So s dot id property, right? You don't need to write set s dot set id and then break it, and then you need to provide some id. Here you can access directly 101, 100, or let's say 100, and now if you can print this. Okay, so let's print this, and now if you print, it will override 0 to 100. Here you see 0 and then 100. Now in a very similar way, let's access each and every other entities, that means id, name, and the pay. So let's do that. S dot name string property, it means the name property. Let's give some name, that is employee 1. Oh, sorry, employee 1. Okay, s dot it means pay property, and I will provide 2000.1 and f. Okay, now I will access this with the help of this console.writeLine. Let's access this. So instead of this is my employee ID, I'll write this is employee name, and this is employee pay. Okay, or let's say if I write this is employee salary, just for the sake of understand it better. Okay, now instead of s.id property, I'll write s.string property here, s.string property, and instead of s.id property, I'll write s.pay property, because we are accessing float. Okay, pay. Okay, so let's run this. You will see this is my employee ID 0, and we override that. This is my employee ID 100, and then this is my employee name employee 1, and this is my employee salary 2001.1. So this is how you can work with your property. Now the question is, why can't I use here the parentheses? So if you try to do that, it will basically give you an error. You see, let's just first comment it out, and let's try to do that. If I do here braces, and if I do something like int id over here, you give me an error. You can see this is not possible. If I try to build my solution, you give an error. It will treat this property as a method. So it is asking you, see, he's asking you, put the semicolon over here. It is expecting something. So it is, right now this property that you are declaring over here, it is working as like method. It is not right now property. Okay, it is method now. So you can't do that actually, right? So this is not the exact solution that we want. So that's why we are not using any parentheses, and it is not accessible. So that's why just remove that parenthesis, or you cannot even use the empty parentheses, or not even you cannot pass any arguments in your properties. This is not possible. Okay. One more thing that I want to say is, what if I change the access modifier of this public? Okay, instead of public, if I write private, but we have overridden method, you can override this get and set operation. So instead of if you want to make your this property with some restrictions like private or some protected, if you want to make some restrictions on your property, instead of writing this access modifier here, protection level here, write the protection level here. So if you want to make if you want to make like if you want to make a restriction that no one can change my ID, you can directly make here you can write private. When I write private over here, I cannot access this set operation or set operation here in my main method. I cannot do that, because private is I can change the ID here in this class, sample class. I can do anything, because private can be accessed in the same class. I can do here anything I can do with this set operation, but here in the main method I cannot do that. If you want to do that, like let's check this out. Okay, instead of just uncomment this, and let's change. See, there is an error. You are setting the operation here, s.id property. You are doing this, but it gives you an error because your set operation is not right now private. It is not public. So if you do that, it will give you an error. See, property or indexer property sample id property, this property cannot be used in this context because the set accessor is inaccessible. Inaccessible means you had changed the access modifier here from right now it is private. You cannot access this, right? So if I go with internal, internal can be accessed anywhere. I mean, in the same project you can access anywhere. If I run this, it will run. Build success, no problem. If I run it, it will run, no problem. Right? So instead of making the protection in your property, right, you can make the this getting and set get or setter operations. You can make restrictions on that because ultimately property is not doing anything, but your operations are doing. Okay, so you can make your operations. I mean, under the protection, you can do that. One another thing that I want to clear it out here is actually don't remember it, but yeah, that is one thing, and I hope you understand the properties in a very good manner. And if you're not, then comment it out, please. And if now the question is how can I access the arguments here. If I want to pass the arguments, then you can use something called as indexers. Indexers can be done. Indexers is also one more a kind of it is attached with property. If you want to access this private members in some other class, you can use also indexers. Indexers are nothing but virtual arrays that we will cover it up in our later sessions. Okay, I hope you understand it, and thank you so much for listening to me.